he's know where this is the black government that has this thing. So he knows they're covering it up. And I think he was working for Senator Byrd at that time. And it was his
Senator Robert Byrd from West Virginia?
Yes.
Yeah.
So it was his task to find out more about this.
Okay. So he wasn't in a government. Do you know? Did he show you any identification?
Well, okay. He gave me. He wrote his name and number down on a legal pad, and after his initials, he put NSC or NSA. I forgot which it was. The National Security Council or NSA. And if I got any threatening phone calls, I was to call him.
Okay. Yeah.
And I did not get any. I've not got any threatening phone calls, but he did identify himself as being with the NSC.
Oh, okay. Very interesting. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. Well, in your book, you talk a little bit about some other UFO visits, and specifically one you mentioned here in the state of Montana, which is pretty noteworthy. Incident at Malmstrom Air Force Base and then the surrounding areas, Minuteman missile silos in 1967. I actually lived in Montana. I was here going to Carroll College in Helena at that time, but I don't remember the incident. But go ahead and briefly describe that, what you know about that particular incident.
Well, it's just from what I've read about. As a matter of fact, I did meet one of the guys who was there at the time, but apparently there's some UFO activity over one of our missile sites at Malmstrom. And what it did, it enabled the missile. It shut everything down. There was about 10 missile sites that were shut down. And they couldn't figure out what in the heck was going on here because, it's just impossible for this to happen. But those sites were, there was a flying saucer or some kind of craft hovering over one of the control centers, where they have the capsule on the ground. And apparently this thing has a capacity to shut the electronics off on the missile network. And after this thing left, reportedly, the missiles came back online. So who knows what that was. But apparently, whoever is in these craft, they can control our nuclear weapon systems.
Yeah, that was quite an incident. Apparently, the electronic of each of these silos were independent of one another, and they all went down. And like you say, when they left, they all came up. And I know Boeing was a contractor, and they came in and looked at the equipment, and there was nothing wrong with it. So I believe there was a book written about that called The Fated Giant, or Robert Salas and Jim Klotz wrote the book, and there are not many copies out. I have one in my library, which I hope to get unpacked here pretty soon. Well, we're about to wrap up here, Jesse. First off, outside of the Roswell debris, have you had any other UFO sightings?
Well, actually, I've seen some strange lights. The most notable of which this is when I was in Iraq. We were flying back from northern Iraq up close to Kurdistan back to Balad, where our home station was. And I was in a Black Hawk helicopter, and this is at night. We always flew with two Black Hawks in case one gets shot down and the other can rescue the survivors. And at night, you don't fly with any visible lights on. It's all infrared, because you don't want the bad guys on the ground to look at you, because if you get visible lights, you can get shot down. But I did see a light going over the desert heading up toward Turkey, and it was flying over the desert area there. A bright white light there. It was not a position light or anything like that, and who knows what that was. But it was in a no-fly zone. It was not a civilian aircraft, and I knew it was not a military. So just a white light going over the desert heading up toward Turkey. It was a light that should not have been there. So who knows what that was. Right,
yeah, thanks for sharing that. One thing we talked about the other day, you wrote in your book that there's been some radio monitoring from outer space. I don't know whether it was the SETI instrument or not, at around 1440 megahertz. And you think that is a frequency that ET would talk to us. And then I showed you off my website a graph of one of the rocky planets that the Green Bank, West Virginia radio telescope picked up some communications at that same frequency from one of these rocky planets. And tell us why ET would probably communicate on that frequency.
Well, that's a very, relatively quiet frequency for the universe. You have the hydrogen frequencies, the OH frequencies, but between the HOH, they call it the water hole, and it's fairly quiet. So if you're going to transmit into interstellar space great distances, you want to pick a relatively quiet part of the background radiation, and so 1440 or 1420 to 1440 is a fairly quiet part of the interstellar background radiation, and natural frequencies or natural radiation are very broad band. Artificial frequencies are very narrow band, and this is right at the right frequency, narrow band, which means it was probably not artificial, probably not natural, but an artificial background. So who knows?
Right.
But it fits the description of an extraterrestrial signal.
Right. I believe the chart that I found on this report was 1439, which is in that window that you described. Well, lastly, you mentioned to me the other day that I believe it was in your first house or here in Helena that you saw some unusual green lights in the house. Is that correct? Am I stating that right? This is a paranormal program, so.
Yeah. We mentioned we lived in one of the 1880, 1890 mansions on the west side here, and my kids report seeing some lights floating around their room there and some footsteps, But I don't know. I didn't see them myself, but they were convinced of it. So who knows?
Yeah, I have a relative here, or a relative of a relative, my sister-in-law's brother, and he bought a new condo over where there used to be a big mining shaft, and he says there's a lot of paranormal activity, so I might find myself getting off the UFO stuff and going into being a ghost hunter for a while, as long as they don't follow me home. Well, Jesse, is there anything you'd like to add that I missed that you'd like to emphasize?
Well, I want to tell people that we're not alone, that we do have our cousins out there, and they don't seem to be, aggressive toward us, who knows, but, and people ask, why have they contacted us directly rather than just indirect visualizations? And I said, well, from what I saw in Iraq and our wars, they probably have more fear from us than we from them. So they probably are not about to make real contact yet. I think we're probably not ready for it. But they're out there. I don't think people need to be afraid of it, but by golly, they're there.
Right. Well, Jesse, we really appreciate you being with us tonight, and I thoroughly enjoyed talking to you, and can't thank you enough. And hopefully I'll see you again now that I'm nearly a next-door neighbor to you. And again, thanks a lot.
Okay, Bill, you're welcome. It's been my pleasure.
Okay, Jesse. Good night.
Good night.
Well, that was Jesse Marcel, really great guy, and really giving us a first-hand perspective of the UFO phenomenon. We're going to take a short break here, and then I'm going to come back and discuss some UFO incidents and recent reports that I've got. And we take us down to the bottom of the hour. We'll take another break, and then we'll take your calls and messages on the chat room. I believe for phone calls, the number, if I can find it here, somewhere on top, 888-919-2355. The website is InceptionRadioNetwork.com. You can go to the chat room if you want to ask your questions there. But we'll take a short break, and we'll be back with you in a couple of minutes. Yeah, we're back. This is William Puckett. I'm your host tonight for the weekly Epic Voyages paranormal, UFO, weirdo, whatever phenomena radio show. And if you missed it, we had Dr. Jesse Marcel Jr. on the first part of the hour talking about the Roswell debris that he handled, and it was a a real treat to have him on, and I really encourage you to purchase his book, The Roswell Legacy. Very, very well written, also co-authored with his wife, Linda Marcel. And he talked about the Roswell debris, and if you missed it, catch it on the podcast, which probably be available the next day or two. And, well, this is William Puckett again. Give you some information. My website, www.ufosnw.com, and Epic Voyagers website, www.epicvoyagers.com. If you have paranormal sighting, paranormal experiences, or UFO sightings, encourage you to go to those sites. And lots of interesting cases since I've last done the show, which was towards the end of December. And an abduction case investigated by Dr. Bradford Evans, who works with me. He was a guest on our last show. And this happened several years ago in a reservoir close to a town called Greene, Ohio. And I'm going to, that particular report is on my website, and you can find those cases by going to my website, www.ufosnw. But these two gentlemen were out fishing, and they saw this triangular object moving slowly, and they were quite bewildered by it. And it was a large black triangle, had three bright white lights in each of the corners, and between the lights the body was a blackest black. And they estimated that the craft was about half as long as the reservoir was wide, about 200 yards, is moving very slowly to the south-southeast. Anyhow, one of the witness that reported it had served in the Army under a helicopter squadron in West Virginia, and he knew this was an unusual craft. And as it passed over, all the frogs stopped croaking, crickets stopped chirping, just like everything stood still. And what had happened was they believed they experienced some missing time, because when the craft left, they both had fish on their lines. They didn't even recall baiting their hooks. And they had no nosebleeds or any other things that happened with UFO encounters, but the recollection of it, and this happened in 1988, the gentleman had some flashbacks. Unfortunately, the other witness we've been unable to contact. He doesn't want to talk about it, but apparently he had some traumatic experience as a result of this particular encounter. So, mentioning that, Dr. Evans thought that the witness was a good observer, and he believes that he related what he saw truthfully. So, anyhow, that's been an interesting experience, and one of my better reports, even though it was an older one. I just got another case tonight. This is one that is, I would say, is in the mill, but I haven't had many of them, but it's a cattle mutilation, and I found out about it through a journalist from Missouri, from the Kansas City area. Apparently, he knows this woman who's training to be veterinarian, and there was a cattle mutilation near the Kansas City Municipal Airport, and I got to pull out what I wrote down about this. Apparently, the incident happened in early December 2011, near a farm near Kansas City Municipal Airport. And the trainee veterinarian and the veterinarian were really thought this was quite unusual. And the carcass, the vagina and uterus were surgically removed from the animal with clean cuts. And there were no tracks leading up to where they found the carcass, no blood around the site. This is a usual cattle mutilation scenario. And so I'm hoping to find out more about this. And I'm even trying to get the autopsy report from the veterinarian. But with cattle mutilations, it's really difficult to get any information from veterinarians, even though there have been autopsies done. And so calling that to your attention, that particular case is not on my site, but as soon as I get more information, I'll post something on it. Another case recently, and this is actually on my news postings, and this happened recently, that there was a sonar, some shipwreck researchers were doing some sonar soundings over the Baltic Sea looking for shipwrecks, and they got these unusual echoes of something on the bottom of the sea. I gather it was about 260 feet, and they got two of them. They're sort of round devices, look similar to, they call it the Star Wars Millennium Falcon, and they can't go down there to do any excavation because the sea is too rough. We're having a rough winter over in that area, so maybe in the near future we'll find a crashed UFO. Some people think it's just artifacts at the bottom of the sea, which could very well be the case, but the sonar shows it's a massive cylinder with about 60-meter diameter and about a 400-meter-long tail. For those of you that don't know what sonar is, it's literally an acoustic device, echosonde device that they use under in water. Works quite well, and to find objects, and to it actually will paint you a profile of something based on the reflectivity of acoustic waves. So stay tuned for that particular news story. There'll be more update. Okay, we got a question from the chat room. Let's see, where are we at here? What branch of first responders are sent out to investigate cattle mutilations? Police, pest control, carcass pickup? Very good question. You know, I really, I don't know the answer to that. I mean, cattle die all the time, and, you know, if a rancher wants to find out, I suppose he would call a veterinarian, but you know, if it's in the city limits, I'm sure that, you know, the pest control would respond to remove the carcass if it's causing a health effect. So that's a good question, and I really don't have a complete answer to that. So that's a good question. So anyhow, another question here. What is your best guess on what has been causing the strange sounds heard around the world? Well, I haven't been really up on that. You know, I haven't seen any recent news clippings of that, so I guess I'm not sure. Maybe the person posing that question could elaborate a little bit more on the source of this, where they've been reading this information. I know that, I've heard this in the past, hums and stuff that people hear, and, we have that problem here in Helena with some mining activity, but some people even think it's a HAARP. That's a high altitude experiment up in Alaska that causes some of this. I don't know if that's the case or not, but anyhow, I really don't have an answer to that. I'm not personally not aware of that. I haven't heard anything about it recently. So again, if you have questions, you can go to the chat room on inceptionradio.com. If you'd like to call into the show, that number is 888-919-2355. Sorry we didn't get a chance to route questions to Dr. Marcel, but there was only a short time when we had to have him on interview, and I wanted to complete that interview, so maybe in the future we can have him back and open up questions to the audience. So again, if you have any questions, go to the chat room or call in, and we'll try to answer some questions. Unfortunately, the last two questions I wasn't able to provide a good answer to. Again, you go to my website, www.ufosnw.com. I've got some interactive maps of sightings in 2011 and 2012, and you can zoom into these maps and click on the buttons and get more information about particular sightings. And I'm sort of updating probably every few weeks the 2012 sightings, and the reports keep rolling in. A lot of reports I get are explainable. You wouldn't believe how many reports I've had of the planet Jupiter, which is very bright in the western sky at this time of year. Recently, there's been a conjunction with Venus, and they're both very bright. So lots of reports on clear nights I attribute to, not all of them, but some of them, to these particular phenomena. And so a few other cases on my site. If you go to my home page, some of my recent best cases are there. I just got this report today from Meridianville, Alabama, which is in north central Alabama, near Huntsville. And a 14-year-old kid, his mother actually reported the particular encounter. Apparently this happened twice a couple of months ago, and he was in his bedroom watching TV, and he saw this bright blue lights through his shutters, and he thought it was quite unusual, and it frightened him enough that he just crawled into bed and told his mother about it the next day, and she didn't think too much of it, but apparently it happened again. I'm not sure how long later, a few days. That's what I gathered. This time the first incident happened about 1:30 in the morning. The second incident apparently was around 3:30 a.m. It was on a weekend. Apparently mother allowed him to stay up and watch TV. This time he saw the same bright blue lights through the cracks. Then he heard footsteps on the roof and light scratching at his door. And this really frightened him, and frightened him enough that he got up and wrote something on his Facebook posting. And then he got up the next morning and he wanted to be sure he wasn't dreaming, and sure enough, he had posted it on Facebook. So I encourage the mother and the boy to take careful notes and to document experiences, hopefully with photos, and then if something unusual happens, to go outside and see if there's any burn marks or any other particular debris, to take samples, and to put the samples, seal them up in a plastic bag, and get the date and time and everything and send them to me. So that's another ongoing case. The problem with a lot of these abductions, close encounters, is, we lack physical trace evidence, and sometimes I'm able to get my hands on it, and if so, we will send it in and get it analyzed. So, again, we're getting towards the bottom of the hour. I'm going to talk about another case, then we're going to take a short break, and then we'll take some more calls or chat room texts. And again, that phone number, if you missed it, it's 888 919-2355. Website inceptionradionetwork.com. And as far as some other cases, I generally put photo cases and everything on my home site. I got some photos recently from a gentleman, and I'm probably mispronouncing this, Kaing Mai Thailand, taken on January 7th, 2012. This is what happens with a lot of cases is people take photos and then they find unusual things in the background of photos. This very well could be birds or insects, but there are quite a few of them in the photos, and apparently they weren't in the other photos. So take it for what it's worth. Maybe it's something unusual. We're going to take a short break. We're back in a few minutes, and we'll take your calls. Hi, everyone. We're back. This is William Puckett, your host on the weekly Epic Radio Show. We're approaching the last 30 minutes of the broadcast. If you missed it last hour, we had Dr. Jesse Marcel Jr. on talking about the Roswell incident. He handled the debris. Encourage you to purchase his book, The Roswell Legacy. You can get it on Amazon.com, and there's links on my site or on Epic Voyages site to find and purchase the book. A very great book. We're going to take your calls this hour, and I got a question that just came in the chat room, and the question is, do any of these maps or reports include marine sightings of UFOs or USOs, that's under